Feminists like to say that if men were more open with their emotions, they'd be less likely to commit suicide. Is there any stats or sources that they can point to that suggest that?
Okay, well, here's the thing. Men who are more likely to be open with their emotions have people who care.
Yes.
So it's not a situation where you can put the responsibility on men. You need to give them a place, you need to give them a community that's got their back and is concerned with their well-being and values them and also gives them a standard to live up to. That's what you need. But the truth is that how do they know that these men who can be open with their feelings aren't being able to be open with their feelings because they have people who want to hear it? In which case it's not that the men are not the controlling factor here. It's having a community willing to listen to the issues and problems of men, like this community. And unlike communities that seem to make a profit off of male tears mugs.
Somebody's bed.
I look back at this and it's hard to believe. I mean, this started literally in 2013 when I was just having a casual conversation with Tom Golden, who's been a friend for 10 years now. And he said, yeah, you need to have a conference.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh yeah, what a great idea. It'll be simple. Just have a few people together and it's no big deal. Oh man, was I wrong. And it turned out to be a nightmare. There were death threats. We had to change venues at the last minute because the hotel pulled the plug after the death threats. And we got it done. We scrambled. It still came off to be a great conference. And that experience made me understand how important the conference was. That if they were going to work that hard to try to keep us from coming together in public and expressing our ideas and supporting each other, then they must be really scared. And they are. They're terrified of us.
Pull me around, drag my bed name down. Pull me around, drag my bed name down. Pull me around, drag my bed name down. Now I need some food, some sleep, some company to keep the sun, some shade.
Since then, thanks to Mike Buchanan and a wonderful team of people in Australia, there have been 3 more conferences, and they have withstood the slings and arrows of feminists, social justice warriors, and other assorted meanies, lunatics, and doofuses, intent on preventing us from meeting and discussing our true goal of reinstating the patriarchy. Also creating a fleet of cybernetic amphibious superintelligent sharks with lasers installed in their foreheads, with which we plan to take over the world. And yes, I said that. I said it out loud. The whole compassion for men and boys thing was just a smokescreen to cover up our true intentions.
Pull me around, drag my belly down. Pull me around, drag my belly down. Pull me around, drag my belly down. I need some food, some sleep, some company to keep the sun, some shade, and somebody's bed.
That's ultimately the thing I've wanted to talk about, is the reason why I do this is because I care about all men. I don't care about their sexuality, I don't care about their race, I don't care about their political leaning, I don't care if they're incels, I don't care if they're alt-right, I don't care if they're feminists or Antifa. All of these groups attract men, or they are made in part by men who are themselves broken. Most of I think it's like 24 out of the 25 of the last school shootings, the one thing that connected all of those together, the mass shootings rather, was that they didn't have a father in the home. And that's something that no one is talking about. They want to talk about gun control, they want to talk about toxic masculinity, they want to talk about giving teachers guns. And look, all those things are important issues that we should be talking about, but if you're not addressing the core thing that connects all of these problems together, these things are just going to keep happening, and we're never going to solve the problem.
I've always fought for men's rights. I believe in, well, I'm a man. Why wouldn't I? They say, well, you're black. Why don't you talk for black rights?
Sure,
okay.
sure.
But they never say, you're a man. Why don't you speak for men's rights?
Yeah.
And that dynamic right there is the reason why I wanted to get in front of the world, if I could, to talk about, to joke about, to laugh about, but to cry about.
Yeah.
We have to understand that there's a lot of pain that men are going through, which is the reason why you have us committing suicide at such large rates.
Yeah.
Do you understand that if men die anywhere between like 10, 15 years earlier than women do, it's a stupid number.
Sure.
If it was opposite that,
Yeah.
there would be a whole bunch of people saying, we got to save the women. These women are dying too young.
Yeah.
You look at these football over here in America, our football. Every October, they're wearing pink. They're showing support for women going through breast cancer.
Yeah.
But the next month, it's prostate cancer.
Yeah.
You don't see it. And those men will suffer from what first? Breast cancer or prostate cancer. So they don't even care about their own deaths. So that's why I do what I do, because I want to give men somebody to say, hey, that guy fought for us.
I'd like you to comment on the Black Lives Matter movement and how
I got some words for that.
How it actively obscures men's issues because it's really black men and it's their maleness, not just the race.
Yeah, can I just jump? I'm not
you're
black.
You're the black.
I'm not black, but I got something to say.
You got
If you-
light skin privilege.
Yeah,
so
well,
go ahead.
I did my 23andMe, and I'm 24% Sudanese, so I'm pretty African, okay? So 50% Iberian and 0.05% Ashkenazi Jew, so I know what I'm talking about. So, woo! Okay, anyway. Yeah, Black Lives Matter is not an organization that is interested in the suffering of black people. And they are, if you go to the website, just go to the website and look at their mission statements and look at what they actually, their core principles. That's like the best way to find out whether or not an organization has the best interests of whatever it is that they claim to have. BLM is an intersectional feminist group. They actually prioritize black women over black men. And let me explain why that's strange. There's nothing wrong with loving black women and caring about them, obviously. But you built a movement that started because black men were being killed. Okay? Whether you think that it's justifiable or not, that's not the point. Because the narrative is, you know, evil racist cops, evil racist government is killing black men. And then you start the movement, and then within the people who started the movement, by the way, 3 women, intersectional feminists, black women, they call them, have you ever heard of, there's, I think they're called black feminists or Afro feminists? But anyway, it's a different, huh? Oh, womanists, that's right, womanists, right. They started it, I forget their names. And if you look at it, it's all about, it talks about support for women of color, LGBTQ people of color, everything except men. Actually, men are not even listed in the people that they claim to care about. Imagine the people in your group, in your tribe, die, and then you form a movement that's based on their deaths, but in your manifesto, you don't mention those people at all. And that's Black Lives Matter. And to go further with it, there are a lot of Black Lives Matter sort of adjacent websites that talk about these issues. There's one website, you may have heard of it, called The Root. You ever heard of The Root? And they put out an article, and they put a lot of really, really cancerous shit on this website. But this one was entitled, Black Heterosexual Men Are the White People of Black People. So that means that the men who are dying, that are being killed, that start the movements, are also the most oppressed, the biggest oppressors of the people within that subculture, within that racial group, you could say.
And the most privileged.
And the most privileged. And this is actually the reason why I don't like talking about men's issues from a race perspective, because feminists always, and why don't you talk about black men, or why don't you talk about Hispanic men? And I'm like, because the most important group is men, and I can put it to you this way. If you want people to pay attention to men's issues, you may have to point them at men that look like us and that are suffering, in order for people to even start to give a shit about men that look like you. And why is that necessary? If we stopped, look at it like this too. Take the data. So there's all this statistical data about the survivability of brown men and black men, but they don't describe them as brown or black men. They just say blacks, which includes women for some reason, even though women are far less likely to be victims of violent crime, whether they're black or not. And they say this is a racial problem. But if you took that same data and you just looked at men, no matter what the race is, no matter what the color is, no matter what their ethnicity or their culture, and you lumped all of that data together, then you'd really have something to talk about. But that might be the reason why they don't want to talk about it.
Feminism is not a synonym for women. Feminism is a special interest group. It is an ideology. It has its own ideas. It is both descriptive and prescriptive. And the description, in my opinion, the diagnosis is wrong, because our objection to feminism is not that it's an advocacy group for women. It's that it really does pit men and women against each other as if they are nations at war. And that's not a world I want to live in. That's not a world I want my sons to live in. And it's certainly not a world I want my daughter to live in.
Everywhere a man walks, he's privileged just by being a man. And it just blows my mind that that's their argument. And I said, okay, what about even the fact that 80% of suicides are male? Is that a reason to maybe care?
Yeah,
and she says, see, exactly, that's toxic masculinity right there. It's an example of toxic masculinity. Suicide? Yes. So it's really hard to get through to feminists, because everything you say it's either it's an example of toxic masculinity, or it's an example of privilege to them. Mm-hmm. And they don't seem to understand that there are so many different areas and venues in a woman's life where she's the privileged one, and she gets advantages for being a woman.
It sometimes seems as if there is just no length to which the radical feminist lobby can't go that won't get quite a lot of public support, or at least acquiescence. Maybe it's not support, but it certainly is acquiescence, and by men too.
Only one gender, assuming that it's a binary, is allowed to be sympathized with. And I have to specify when I say allowed, I specifically do not mean the semi-anonymous trenches of the internet, but polite social discourse in schools, for example, in the newspapers, in the traditional media that at least I was raised to trust for the most part.
It seems like feminist intentions are not equality, they want superiority. Mm-hmm. And everything they say, it's a way to control men.
I can still recall the first time that my counter-arguments against feminism got me dismissed as a misogynist. I was absolutely outraged. All seems rather quaint in hindsight when I look back on it now.
One of the main attack points about men's rights activism is that A, it doesn't do anything practical to help men, okay? And B, that it attacks feminism, okay? Now,
they say that like it's a bad thing?
Anything that's perceived to be good for women, even if it isn't actually, it will be supported by a lot of women and also by a lot of men.
And it's almost instinctual. You have
it seems to be just something deep in
nature as well as nurture.
Which is what shows the feminist lie, which the feminist lie is always that men hate women, men resent women, men see women as the other, and that it's in some way disgusting, or they project everything that they don't like about themselves and about nature onto women. It couldn't be further from the truth. It's the opposite.
You can't talk about gender issues without bringing feminism into the discussion. It's impossible. And yes, we're critical of feminism. There's plenty of very good reasons to be critical of that. as far as it hasn't done anything practical for men, my email inbox proves that's untrue. The literally dozens and dozens of men I've heard from who were saying, I was thinking about taking myself out until I found your work or Karen Straughn's work, and now I feel sane and I'm rebuilding my life toward wholeness. And when you come to one of these conferences, you see that in action going on all around you. If that's not a practical benefit, I don't know what is.
If you say that all men are bad and all men are responsible for the crimes committed by a few of them, you're killing off the goodwill.
That's the thing that feminists bang
That's
on
the
about
narrative.
all the time. Oh, these men, they're full of hatred, they're this and that. No, they're not. I have not met these men, and they're not here, they're not anywhere.
I think if women were treated this way for 60 years, they would have thrown a fit a lot earlier than this. And, you know, men aren't even throwing a fit. They're just raising issues.
And what do you think they're so afraid of?
Well, because, I mean, I hate to be oversimplistic, but they're lying, we're telling the truth. They've been lying about men and women and masculinity and femininity and gender for 50 years, telling one bald-faced lie after another. It has hurt women, it's hurt men, it's hurt children, but they've made a lot of money from it, because there's a lot of money in casting women as victims. I mean, you show a woman with bruises on her, oh man, the dollars, they just keep coming in. Show a man with bruises, whatever, it's a joke. So we're never going to make the money that feminists do. We have to do this because it's true, not because it's a popular idea or a moneymaker. And that scares them, because their funding is wrapped up in the lie.
I want to share a little bit of success on our side from Germany, and because most of you don't speak German, I guess you're not aware of this advertisement. There was a Mother's Day advertisement for a grocery store, and it showed fathers failing as parents, while there was a voiceover saying, thank you for always being there, thank you for protecting me, while you see the fathers failing in doing so. And then in the end, you see the girl, a father eating nachos and being disinterested, the girl in the middle, and then you hear the girl saying, mother, thank you for not being father, and hugging the mother. And the whole thing was in black and white with piano music, like really touching. And that video, and that was banned. That was taken down because there was so much backlash from mothers, from fathers, because it was so far that everybody was able to see the misandry in this. So people are slowly waking up because they're doing too much.
Tupac Shakur, one of the greatest African-American literary artists of all times, he had a lyric in one of his songs, and he talked to his mother, and he said, even though you was a crack fiend, mama, you always was a black queen, mama. And I said, damn, the bar is low on queendom. But daddy missed 2 child support payments, and he ain't shit.
I want to ask a question about kind of mothers and motherhoods, because I mean, you talked, very passionately about that and about the significance, particularly in the black community, of the role of mother. All the science is in that a father is very important, and you do not want to separate your father from your children, even if the relationship has ended. Why do you think that so many kind of good mothers still do that? That sort of thing, they might instinctually want the best for their children, but yet they go against that instinct to push the man completely out of the picture?
Because I don't think they have the instinct to do what's best for their kids. Most of the time they have the instinct to do what's best for themselves. And you can't really get mad, because from birth to adulthood, most women are being told that how they feel and what they think matters more than the greater good. Most men are being told that there's a greater good. Even though you're walking in this door, there's some other people coming behind you, hold the door for them, let them in. Men are being told greater good, greater society. Women are being told what you want, that's what you get. I talk to a lot of men, and when I was doing a Fatherless America, it was really sad because I thought, well, it's a black and white issue. But then I realized black people are the canary in the coal mine. Whatever happens to us will eventually happen to you. And if white men are smart, see, your plight is different than ours. We don't marry women to get them pregnant. Y'all were dumb enough to marry them.
I think we should always remember two salient points. One is that fatherlessness is the single most important social issue we face. And second, the second one is that fatherlessness is the public policy of the United States and many other countries as well. And if you keep those two things in mind, you've got a pretty good handle on fatherlessness. Why is it the most important issue we face? Because the toxic roots of fatherlessness go into every aspect of social life. Crime, violent crime, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, poor academic performance, poor relationships, suicide, prison. It goes on and on and on. And as Tom pointed out, how much money do we spend on this? How much money do we spend trying to put out these fires when the linchpin is fatherlessness? Fatherlessness is public policy. Everywhere you look, in the law and in the practice that social agencies engage in, like Child Protective Services, for example, the policy is separating fathers from children. It happens in divorce court, as we know. It happens with child support. It happens in adoption laws. It happens with paternity fraud. It happens with Child Protective Services. The Urban Institute years ago did a study of Child Protective Services, children's welfare organizations. And when a child is taken from a mother due to abuse or neglect, in over 50% of the cases, they don't even try to locate the father as a placement for the child, even though it's free. You know, if the child ends up with the father, they don't pay the father to take care of the child, but if it ends up in foster care, they do. Again, I can expound at great length on this, but two things. Fatherlessness is the major social problem, and it is public policy.
And I did this movie called The Fatherless America. And in that movie, I went by where the Twin Towers were, and I saw this big plaque of all the firefighters that ran up into the building to save those people. You know what I didn't see on that plaque? One female. So while the thing that would make the normal person would say, this thing is on fire, I'm running away. For centuries, what have men done? They ran towards it. D-Day, they ran towards it. It's their job. But those same men who made it out of that building, saved people, many of them found themselves still in divorce court, still seeing their children for 48 hours a month. No one laments that. No one has a problem with that.
What is a man? Is a man brave? Is a man a hero? Is a man a protector? Is a man vulnerable? Is a man disposable? broken. Is a man trying? We see the good in men.
I just saw now, it was so sad, there were only a few people there because there's so much else that's good going on, but it was by the creator of he's the company CEO of Egard Watches.
Yes.
And he did his own little video about how he came to make the video in response to the Gillette ad, talking about how for a long time he'd been aware of the anti-male, public culture, and he'd seen friends of his who were going through divorces and losing custody of their children, seeing the pain that they experience. He'd become very interested in the fact that often following a divorce, if men lose custody of their children, that they experience depression, alcoholism, and often suicide. And so he started to think about these issues, and then he said when he saw that Gillette ad, it was the final straw.
Yes.
And he stayed up all night and made his response to it, and it's just a beautiful response about what is a man.
Yes.
And he said that everybody else in the company was in support of it, but actually afraid to take a public stance. So for a while he was thinking of just releasing it, personally, not as Egard Watches, but I guess eventually he talked the other members of the company into putting the name of Egard to it.
Probably one of the reasons there were so few is because they were having that conversation about the Gillette adverts in the main room with Carl Benjamin and Dankula, some of the big names.
Yeah.
Obviously the numbers are in for Gillette, and they lost it considerable. They lost billions. And it has been mentioned also that it wasn't just sort of, it was about reputational damage as well, the impact on the name Gillette, so how much that's costing them. Their sort of position on this is that it was worth it because they're going for the younger market.
Right.
Now, obviously, that could just be all talk. I'm curious, do you think there's any validity to that?
Hard to say. It's hard to say. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, certainly young people, one segment of young people that I've come into contact with at university seem to be pretty much on board with the feminist message.
Yeah.
I would say that overwhelmingly, I teach English, so sorts of students who tend to go into English literature maybe are more susceptible to all that leftist and feminist messaging.
Yeah.
But I would say, there's a lot of support for the angry feminist, exhortation, the conviction that women have been treated badly for a long time, and that now it's the time of the women, and the men have to step back and have to support their women and have to accept that their own life choices are going to become limited. But that's a good thing because they should be supporting women, and that is the public line that most university students, I think, know. They know that that's what they should be supporting, and so a lot of them believe it. I think a significant number of people don't really believe it, especially young men, but feel they can't dare not say anything against it.
One thing that surprised me, there's some people in the media, and it's mainly the British media, so you might not even be familiar with them. And again, I don't want to get into names, but there are people that I kind of very much respect in the media who, actively criticise feminism, and they criticise identity politics, and I suppose their kind of philosophy, and they speak kind of very much in favour of men's rights. So I've been surprised on occasion to hear them speak so disparagingly and so negatively about men's rights activists. Okay, and it's almost like it's sort of a throwaway kind of, they're just losers. It's partly that it's not a cool thing to be a men's rights activist. Arguably.
And these are the same people that would not be using the rhetoric they're using had it not been for the work that we did kicking in doors.
And that's the criticism that gets leveled at them. The question I want to ask you, though, is I've been trying to work out, because it just struck me as kind of, why would they be so dismissive? Because they seem to be so aware of all the issues around it. And the one bit that I kind of can connect with, I think there is some currency, is that there's a suspicion that kind of men's rights activism is almost an inevitable conclusion of the identity politics framework, where everybody becomes a victim. So I suppose the question is, how, as a movement, do we avoid kind of moving into that victimology as opposed to asserting rights and, kind of keeping control of our own empowerment?
That is entirely valid, and it is a concern of mine. It's why you see so often anybody that really follows my work, I hold men's feet to the fire ruthlessly about their choices in life. I've always asserted that, yes, we need to address men's rights, but the fact of the matter is that 90% of men's rights issues could be avoided with proper decision-making and thoughtfulness by men.
Okay, yeah.
If you don't make dumb decisions, you don't end up in a bad system getting screwed.
Yeah.
And so I see that as a sort of an inherent danger in any movement, that it takes the form of identity politics. But what do? Say, okay, we can't do this because it might turn into identity politics.
It's catch-22, absolutely. Yeah.
You have to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And what I've chosen to do is to just do my part, to do whatever I can to send the message that turning this into poor me, the world owes me, the government owes me, people should cry for me, people should give me money.
Yeah.
Turning it into that would be a terrible mistake. But in the end, hopefully, we might see the phenomena that once everybody's a victim, then nobody's a victim.
Yeah.
It is entirely to the credit of the men's rights movement that it never developed an ism. It never became meninism or manism or anything like that. The men's rights movement is not, as far as I can tell, a revolutionary movement. Instead, it seeks to fulfill the promises that have already been made and claim that which is being denied to mainly lower-class men, which is fair and equal treatment. It agrees with the premise that men and women should be treated as equals, with no distinction because of their gender. It seems to seek redress for the inequalities caused by an illiberal female supremacist movement, one that seeks to blame all ills on men and falsely claim all victimhood to women.
I really like Don Dutton's presentation. I don't know if you saw it about, he basically did a survey of all the major polls and research done on domestic violence from the mid-1970s on, that have shown that the narrative that most people in the general public accept about the violent man and the non-violent woman victim, that accounts for only about 5% of all the cases of domestic violence that have been studied in serious studies. Fantastic. And he brought together all the studies, all the major, what they call meta-analyses. They look at hundreds of other studies. It was really just incredibly good, and so that was one that was just really useful. You just think, if I just have that document of his talk, I can counter so much that is false in general discussions about violence and gender in the general public sphere.
Another interesting fact that is an inconvenient truth when it comes to women victims of domestic violence is that in the UK, in the latest year for which there are figures, women were more likely to be a victim of domestic abuse if they had a female partner than if they had a male partner. It definitely seems to me that the gender-based Bible on domestic abuse needs to be amended. Then we have the disgraceful double standards when it comes to domestic violence, perfectly illustrated by cases of violence, unbelievably, involving British members of Parliament. In 2014, a male MP, David Ruffley, was cautioned for assaulting his partner. his female partner. He was condemned from all angles, investigated by the Conservative Party, and ultimately hounded out of his job. Now, I'm certainly not here to defend what David Ruffley did. Domestic violence is completely unacceptable. But then we fast forward to the case of a female Member of Parliament, Sarah Champion. She was, incredibly, the shadow minister responsible for equality and domestic violence in 2016, who admitted assaulting her partner too, male partner. Was she condemned for that? Not by many. Certainly not by Jeremy Corbyn, who was leader of the Labour Party, said he was 100% behind her following the revelations. Given that this is the same Jeremy Corbyn who said I was deeply sexist for saying nothing, I will let people make their own minds up about who is sexist. Me, or someone supporting a female domestic abuser when there is not a chance on earth he or anyone would support a male domestic abuser in the same way. Astonishingly, this has not just happened once in the British Parliament, with a female MP being the perpetrator of domestic violence. More recently, we had Layla Moran, a Liberal Democrat Member of Parliament, who admitted slapping her ex-partner, male partner, in March this year, in fact. She tweeted about it. And some of the responses were also unbelievable. I quote, Libby Clwyd, Lib Dem, replying to her. Everyone has done something that they regret. Everyone has lost their temper at some point. This is life and a non-issue. You have our full support. Councillor Nick DaCosta, a fellow Liberal Democrat, tweeted back, thank you for sharing, Layla Moran. It's very brave of you to do so. And you are an inspiration. An inspiration. Not only was she congratulated, but was at the same time urged to become the leader of the Liberal Democrat Party. This hypocrisy is breathtaking. When the BBC featured the news of David Ruffley's case, one of their political editors said, a caution for assault cannot be overlooked. The reality, however, in politics seems to be that it can only not be overlooked if you are a man. Female MPs are often claiming the whole political system is unfair towards women. I disagree with them about that. Yet I certainly did not notice their clamour for equal treatment here.
I found a video on YouTube called Feminism and the Disposable Male on a YouTube channel called Girl Writes What. Yeah. This video was particularly moving for me. Never before had I heard a woman sympathetically examine what it was to be a man in Western society. Never before had I heard a woman ask why we do not value men for what they are rather than for what they do. It was the first time that I had heard a woman recognize that women have an inherently high social status. It was the first time I had ever heard about a woman talk about the value of the self-sacrifice that men had made throughout history. I'd never before heard the case made by a woman that masculinity is a force for good. That video changed my life.
The thing is, like, I love gender roles. I love gender differences. I grew up with 4 brothers, and to me, I think there's nothing better than having a man have some skills and strengths that I don't, and I provide some things and strengths that they don't have, because that's what makes us needed and valuable to each other. By feminists insisting that we are exactly the same, that gender is just a social construct, and that women can do every single thing a man can, and a man can do everything a woman can, we don't need each other, what that actually is doing is diminishing women's value and diminishing her power instead of raising it up.
When I was in college, I went to a workshop, And there was a speaker who gave a talk on her trip to Africa and how she had learned about female circumcision there. She received a round of applause, mine included. And it wasn't controversial to be against that. But it was much, much later that I learned that there was an online movement against circumcision for boys. And that was way more hush-hush.
From my perspective, kind of men have a huge amount to contribute to the men's rights movement. But in terms of kind of addressing the feminist movement, that's, it has to come from women. But it has to come from women. Because it's women that are being represented by...
Yes.
Women
have to say, you don't speak for me. It's harder for them, for feminists, to turn that back on women. So, women do need to rein in their crazy sisters, as Jordan said.
Why did I have to learn from Karen about male disposability on the internet? And why did I have to learn from a documentary called The Red Pill, that name, about how the reporting on boys and men during wartime is usually totally overshadowed by the reporting on women and children, because biologically it's easier to feel sympathy for them.
Clearly women have always been leaders in society as well.
That's true, they have. They've had incredible moral authority and power.
And that, the moral authority, particularly.
Why is it a counterculture movement for men to be talking about their issues when this is just the same way that everybody else talks about their issues?
For young men and young women who might watch this, what advice would you give to them about just talking about this subject and about possibly being, taking a risk and being brave about, I know personally when I first started talking to people around me about this subject, there was a kind of an instinctual kind of like, oh, I feel like, kind of people are going to think I hate women, and you have to push past that. So just what advice would you give to anybody who wants to get involved in this?
I would encourage young women, for sure, because I think young women can do it and have a huge impact. I would encourage young women to speak up for what they know is right against feminist excesses and feminist misandry. If they recognize it, they can have a hugely positive impact for good. I would say it's a lot easier for a young woman. She's not going to be destroyed. She's going to have pushback, but they can't do to her what they can and do to any young man who dissents in any way from feminist dogma.
If there's anything that has become clear to me from being at this conference for 3 days, is that if one of the topics that is discussed a lot about potentially feminism as a group of evil or amoral or uncompassionate women that are trying to destroy men, then it is also equally clear that it is a group of compassionate, loving, and moral women that will save us after looking at the leaders of this particular conference. So thank you.
This community creates a sense of community through loving everyone. Because like I said in the beginning, it's really hard to not love women. It's really hard. But it's easy to not love men. So when you get a group of people that loves men, you get a group of people that loves everyone. And they base their identity in that group on having compassion for everyone. And when you base your identity on something as positive as that, I think you get a very positive group. Whereas when you start talking about offense, and what you're really talking about is creating a scapegoating group that's based on throwing people up. Basically, Twitter is wrath. The idea that it scales is this anger and hatred towards people who are not you, and the way that they make that dividing line in these other cultures is that Those people who are offensive need to be ejected. They need to be Twitter mobbed to death.
So, my message to the men's rights movement is simple. Keep going. You are needed now more than ever. You have weathered the slings and arrows and shown that through perseverance you can create a space to discuss those important topics without radical feminist bigots being able to shut you down. Don't stop now.
To save future generations of children from having non-existent relationships with their fathers for no reason other than the whim of their mother, with all the terrible consequences that entails for the fathers and the children, something needs to be done. In Britain, we currently have a domestic abuse bill going through Parliament. I'm going to try to table an amendment to this bill when it comes before the House of Commons to amend the definition of domestic abuse. I want the definition of domestic abuse to include cases where one parent deliberately denies the other parent contact for no good reason at all. As far as I'm concerned, this is just as abusive as some of the other listed abuse, causing significant distress, upset and harm. In some cases, the harm is so bad it can tragically lead to suicide. Anyone in Parliament who allows this recognised situation to continue without trying to do something about it should be ashamed of themselves. I also want to table a further amendment to include false allegations of domestic abuse as domestic abuse in its own right.
What do you hope for the next years to come? If we've kind of we've reached this stage in terms of the size and the spread and the diversity, and there's a lot of kind of media here. What's next?
I want to answer that question by also including a follow-up on what you just said about mainstream people and their reaction to this. It scares them too. Society relies on men being selfless and sacrificing themselves. We do. We rely on men to crawl down into the sewers, to put on diving suits, to go down and work underneath oil rigs, and all manner, and the military, of course. We are a society that really needs men who will sacrifice. And if we start talking about men as human beings, having needs and wants and vulnerabilities, then that threatens that very idea. So it scares people, and I get that. The idea of men not living to serve the world around them, I think it's a false fear, though. I think it's in men's nature to take risks, to do things like that, to make money, to win. And so they will do that anyway, but I think there's a general fear in the public, and it's why this movement is so slow to grow, is that there's a general fear that, man, if you start treating men like human beings, who's going to walk down the dark alleys at night? Who's going to take on those dangerous jobs and sacrifice for their families? That's an irrational fear, but it's a fear that does come with this. So what I see for the future is very slow growth, and a growth that ironically hinges on the continued destruction inflicted on society by feminism and by feminist ideologues, because men don't tend to get ready to become a part of this movement until they've been hurt by not being a part of it. And then they say, suddenly they find religion. Oh yeah, well maybe Paulina Lindenfull, maybe he's saying something true now that they've taken my kids away, and now that they've taken my home and my money and put me in jail. And so we grow slowly. Feminism is doing progressively more damage as time goes by, which is directly feeding the slow growth of this movement.
If you stop, what follows? An unjust future, where the powerful masquerade as the powerless, and the powerless must cruelly suffer in silence. I know that it will be a long and difficult road ahead, as it has been up until this point. But if your mission is to be a success, you can't stop now. It's a strange occurrence of history that a supremacist movement might take control of societies that would otherwise be sympathetic to the suffering of the voiceless, but here we are. There are many men leading lives of quiet desperation. That is, those who do not simply choose to put an end to their suffering. It may come a time that any one of us could be in that position. So I say again, you have to keep going. Those men need you.
You know, part of why we've been successful, and we have been successful, there have been people for 10 years trying to take me down, trying to take ABFM down, trying to take everybody in the men's movement down. Yet here we are, growing anyway, is because we have a healthy measure of not giving up.
Canary in a coal mine. Canary in a coal mine. Canary in a coal mine.
No. I can't tell you about it. It's super top secret. But, okay. But here's, like, you're not recording this, are you?
No. Now if I tell you that you suffer from delusions, you pay your analyst to reach the same conclusions. You live your life like a canary in a coal mine. You get so dizzy even rocking in a straight line. Canary in a coal mine. Canary in a coal mine. Canary in a coal mine.
The plan was that we were going to reinstate the patriarchy, and one of the actual sort of Allison tried to cross the border. She was bringing the prototype shark in a trailer, okay, and she was bringing it to this conference, and you know, all of the speeches and the panels and all of that shit, that was just a cover for our real agenda. Our real agenda was to, like, literally just do the shark with the laser on their forehead thing. Cybernetic, super intelligent, amphibious sharks.
Manly sharks.
Yeah. Oh, what sharks aren't manly? I just gotta ask you that. You're not recording this, right?
Absolutely not. No.
Okay, so she was supposed to bring the shark down to the conference, and we were all gonna, like, actually look at the prototype of the shark. And she got stopped at the border, and it was like everything got fucked from there, and like the entire thing is just like fucking fucked. Fucking got fucked as shit. All of that shit that we did with fucking shark is for nothing. For nothing. Right? I'm stuck out here sitting in the fucking grass with my ass wet at a Hooters. Right? Illegally drinking. In MAGA country. Because that's the only way I can drink and smoke at the same time.
And the pertinent question is, did you ask how the shark felt about all of this?
Who the fuck cares?
Can't you see it too? There's an elephant in the room.